Straw Hut Media.
Really felt like everyone was on the same wavelength. No one, and even though, like, I'll admit, I got starstruck when I got to talk to Elliot Page, but everyone really was there for the same cause. So we had teenagers who were 13, 14 years old, and then people who were literally at Stonewall.
Today, we're following up on a momentous event that is already making waves in the fight for justice and liberation, the first ever Gender Liberation March, which took place in Washington, D.C. on September 14th. If you tuned into our last episode on the march a few weeks ago, you heard from Raquel, Willis, and Eliel, Cruz, the passionate organizers behind this historic event. They shared their vision for a march that wasn't just about protest, but about joy, solidarity, and an urgent call for action. Well, the march has come and gone, but its impact is still echoing. Thousands of LGBTQ+ individuals and allies from all over the country took to the streets to declare that the fight for reproductive rights and transgender rights are inseparable. Protesters marched in defiance of state legislation targeting gender-affirming care, the Supreme Court's ruling overturning the right to abortion, and the aggressive anti-LGBTQ+ agenda of Project 2025. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Kevin Ortega Rojas, who attended the march and experienced this historic moment firsthand. Kevin will share with us the electrifying energy that filled the streets of DC as people came together to demand justice, bodily autonomy, and dignity for all. He'll walk us through the atmosphere where protest and celebration coexisted and the stories of resilience, solidarity, and love that emerged from the event. But this wasn't just a protest. It was a bold celebration of trans and queer joy. There were moments of dancing, laughter, and defiance outside the Heritage Foundation, the conservative think tank that has pushed policies designed to strip away LGBTQ+ rights. In the face of so much adversity, this was a reminder that joy itself can be a form of resistance. As Raquel Willis said, all of our rights are on the chopping block. But this march showed the world that the LGBTQ+ community will not be silenced, and that their joy and their power do not need permission to exist. We'll explore how moments like the Gender Liberation March are pushing back against political forces that seek to erase trans lives and suppress reproductive freedom. And most importantly, we'll discuss how these moments of solidarity are laying the groundwork for a future where bodily autonomy and self-determination are non-negotiable rights for everyone. The march may be over, but the fight for a more just, liberated future is far from finished.
I'm Kevin Ortega Rojas, and this is Pride.
Thank you so much for being here today. First, for our listeners who don't know, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kevin Ortega Rojas. I am a podcaster and a writer.
You do have a podcast. Tell me a little bit about your podcasts.
I am working on a new podcast, but I also have a podcast called By Latin Men that is a queer Latino podcast. And we talk about LGBTQ stories, trending stories, LGBTQ relationships, things like that.
Now, you're here today to talk to us about the Gender Liberation March. We spoke with Raquel and Eliel about it before it happened, and I'm really curious what actually happened the day of the march. So could you please tell me a little bit about how you got involved, how you found out about it? I'm assuming from social media, but I'd love to know that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you. So I consider myself to be a big advocate for trans people, for trans lives. I think that transgender people at this moment in time and protecting trans people should be everyone's priority, regardless of sexual or orientation or gender identity. And so I did find out about the Gender Liberation March through you folks, actually, through you folks sharing it and promoting it alongside Raquel. And so I set aside time to go down there because I thought that it was important, and it was the first time that there was a movement like this specifically responding to legislation, which is what this was all about, an upcoming Supreme Court decision that'll really set the tone for how our government can continue to put bans essentially on trans people. So that's why I went down there. I thought it was really important.
Was this your first time attending something like this?
No, I've gone to different demonstrations and protests and marches before, for the most part up here in New York City, which is where I'm located. And so, New York City is a big LGBTQ friendly place. And so we have a lot of demonstrations. A lot of the folks who were down there actually were people that I knew from attending these kinds of things. So, Raquel, but also people like, Queen Jean, who was on the mic speaking during the event, and folks like that. So I've been to many of these demonstrations, but this one was very unique. It was very specific.
What do you feel like made it so unique?
So, there are always marches, and they're typically led by speakers and people who are leading the group to a specific place. And they let this is why we are all here, and this is our mission, and this is what we're about. And we're gonna head to this place hoping to share a specific message. But what was really beautiful was before the march even started, there were about 2 hours or so of what really felt like a community building opportunity. There were different sections, there were different pop-ups in the area in front of Union Station where this demonstration was set up. And so there was a tent where trans youth and their families could safely watch what was happening and hang out and lay in the grass. There was another tent where people were registering folks to vote. There was a tent where you could take a banned book, so a book that had, been banned from public libraries and schools. One of them was Raquel Willis's book, and so I thought that that was really beautiful. There was also a van that was set up like an art gallery almost, and if you went inside of it, there was queer art and different messages and places to take photos, and so there was a lot of opportunity to meet other people and to discuss what we were all there to, protest.
Can you describe what was the overall feeling and just ambiance of the march? Because from what I saw, actually from your coverage, it was sort of electric and energetic, and there was a lot going on.
Yeah, and I think that it was all of those things that I just mentioned, right? Like it was the opportunity to meet someone like a Blair Money, who's a big social media influencer. She creates that digital series, Smarter in Seconds. And so she was there passing out books and talking to folks, and it was being able to meet so many trans teens who were there with their accepting parents, which is so beautiful because these are the kids that we're fighting for to have an opportunity to make choices about their own bodies. And so when we talk about things like the proposed bans on transgender healthcare and, the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 and the state of our politics right now, it can feel kind of doom and gloom, especially when you're online or you're just seeing all these updates, but it felt really optimistic.
When you got there and you came from New York, right? You traveled there specifically
Yeah.
just for this event. What did you do right when you got there? I mean, there were obviously tents, there were people to talk to. How did your day go?
I got there and the event was being set up. And so immediately I introduced myself to the folks who were setting up the event, as well as some photographers who were there taking portraits of people, which was really nice, because then you also had something to, commemorate this big moment. And so I just started saying hello and introducing myself to people. There was also a station where people were making flower crowns, which was really beautiful. So I stopped to like do that and say hi to the people who were there. And people were traveling from all over. There was a couple who had driven with a group of friends from, I believe, Denver, Colorado.
Wow.
And there was a family that had come up from Florida. A mom and her teenager were there. And so I was saying hi to everyone that I could, and it made it really easy to know who was there for the event because everyone was dressed in white.
So when you spoke to these people at the march, obviously you mentioned that some of them have come far and wide. And in addition to these families and just kind of everyday folks, there were also A-list Hollywood stars like Elliot Page were there, and creators like Blair Romani. And seems like a real, I guess you'd say, just like kind of a meshing of all of these worlds together for this one movement. So what kind of stories did you hear?
Well, I got to speak to this couple who I mentioned, and I think that they were really beautiful and they had met and bonded over their transition stories. And so listening to them tell stories about how having access to healthcare brought them together, in real life, but also made them feel optimistic and how passionate they were about fighting for access to healthcare for trans youth because that is what changed their lives. So hearing personal stories about how this cause was something worth fighting for because you could see the results of it, or you could see sort of the impact that these kinds of bans would have on people's bodies. Like this trans teenager who I spoke to, him and his mom letting me know how much easier it was going through his teen years being affirmed and having access to gender affirming care and talking to this couple and finding out about their story. So seeing the impacts of trans healthcare in real time, I think was really beautiful. And also, you mentioned people like an Elliot Page. Also, Peppermint was there, who performed and spoke, as well as Marty Gold Cummings, who is a really big leader in the trans community and a personal friend. But it really felt like everyone was on the same wavelength. No one, and even though, like, I'll admit, I got starstruck when I got to talk to Elliot Page, but everyone really was there for the same cause. So we had teenagers who were 13, 14 years old, and then people who were literally at Stonewall. Everyone was there to bring all of this energy together and like galvanize so that we could go off to our respective communities and keep that going and pass along the message of this mission.
Now, there were like you mentioned a lot of events and quite a few speakers. Were there any speakers that really stuck with you or that their messages stuck with you?
Yeah, I think that Raquel Willis, who was the lead organizer of this event, I think that Raquel's words struck a chord with me because it felt like listening to a leader. It felt like someone instilling hope in us and letting us know that we would accomplish the thing that we were here to fight for. But she also allowed us to tap into like righteous anger about the possibility of trans healthcare being banned. And she gave us tools to use. There was a call and response. There was the places that we were going to march to. And so I think that Raquel really just did a great job at unifying the entire crowd.
I think I saw some photos. It may have been in your coverage of Raquel with at what looked like almost a dance party in front of the Heritage Foundation.
Yes.
Is kind of like that's what it seems like. Is that sort of what ended up happening? Because that sends a message in itself, right? Having all of these queer people within the community gathered outside of a place like that has its own meaning and impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. Everyone got to the Heritage Foundation headquarters, and there were some choice words that were chanted that I will not repeat here. But I think the beautiful thing about that was, again, the message of the fact that queer joy is rebellion. Like queer liberation is rebellion. And so we basically had a ball in front of the Heritage Foundation headquarters. People were voguing and people were walking and dancing, and we played music. We traveled with this huge speaker all the way from Union Station down to the Supreme Court, then over to the Heritage Foundation headquarters.
Do you mind, for our listeners who don't know, just explaining why, I suppose explaining what the Heritage Foundation is and why all of these events coming to fruition in front of such a conservative think tank is so important.
Sure, I'll explain it to the best of my ability. So, the Heritage Foundation is a conservative, as you said, a conservative think tank that's funded by billionaires with the aim of coming together to write up ideas for legislation and to support conservative candidates for public office and support their campaigns in hopes that they will then take those ideas and those playbooks that they have drafted for them and enact them into law. And the Heritage Foundation has been around since the 70s, and they actually played a really quiet but crucial role in Donald Trump's first term as president of the United States. The Heritage Foundation, similarly to what everyone is talking about now, which is known as Project 2025, a playbook for the next conservative president. That is what it's called. It's an over 900-page document that outlines a bunch of very far right conservative ideas for legislation for the future of America, and basically really just outlines how the next conservative president will overhaul the US government from the inside out. And so in the last administration, uh, Donald Trump and his administration actually fulfilled close to about 73% of what the Heritage Foundation had proposed to them prior to. They've been doing this work quietly, like I said, for decades, and people are now really just starting to pay attention, mostly because they've been doing it for so long that they've gotten really confident. And so there's not a lot of uh sugarcoating the ideas that they have. They are very straightforward with things like wanting to ban access to healthcare for transgender people, and even wanting to limit the rights of queer and gay folks and things like that. And so now people have realized that organizations like this are where we should focus our attention, as well as at the ballot box.
From your perspective, did anyone from the Heritage Foundation take note of what was going on right outside?
If I'm going to be honest, I am pretty sure that there were folks from the Heritage Foundation who were there. There was actually an instance from the event prior to us marching over to the Supreme Court. Someone actually rushed the stage and tried to take over the mic and speak to the audience, and he was immediately shut down with boos and yelling, and the security ran to the stage to get rid of him. That was honestly a really scary moment for the crowd. And it was nice to see everyone step up and protect ourselves and not allow this person to spew the nonsense that he was trying to throw at us. But I'm pretty sure, I mean, there were a handful of onlookers who followed or, came outside while we were there. Who they represented, I mean, I no
And
real
speculate.
idea. Yeah, I have no real idea, but I know that noise was made and people knew that we were there.
Another aspect of the Gender Liberation March that we talked about when we chatted with Raquel and Eliel was the sort of intersection between trans rights and also women's health and the right to choose,
Mhm.
which is another thing that the Heritage Foundation has taken aim at. How did that play out?
It was a front and center issue. I know that myself, when I, discuss these things, I tend to I say overlook reminding people about this intersection, which is a really good thing that Raquel has reminded us, that a really great way to get people to understand our fight is to show them how it impacts them, is to tell them, like, you may think that this has nothing to do with you, but have you considered how these two issues are, they cross each other? And so it was a message that was, driven home a handful of times throughout the event, and something that was discussed. There was a tent set up like the other ones that offered more information on access to abortion, the states where you can have a legal and safe abortion. And so that was discussed often. There were also people on the stage who gave speeches and told their abortion stories. Some of them were trans people.
So everything happened in kind of a short amount of time, and there was a lot, right? What was your favorite moment from the event?
My favorite moment from the event, I am a queer Latino man, and so I come from a culture that is a little bit behind where we are, where progressive people are here in America. Actually, where most Americans are. Most Americans support LGBTQ people and, access to make decisions about our own bodies and, queer rights and marriage equality. But Latinos are typically not there. Latinos are usually a little bit more conservative. A lot of us in this country are either the child of immigrants or people who have immigrated here. And there was an older group of Latinos who I can only assume were about 65 years or older, and they came together. And the amount of older cisgender heterosexual people who were there to support this cause made my heart melt. And so there was a group of Spanish, and they didn't speak English. They knew what they were there for. And I think that they came with one younger queer person who had brought them along. But to see an older generation understand this fight and support it, I think was beautiful because it really does show the reality of where we are in this country and where most people are around the world. Most people want people to make decisions about their own bodies and to have autonomy.
I was going to ask you if anything surprised you, but it sounds like that also did surprise you.
It did. It really did. And I gave, which some people if may have seen the videos that I took. I did some coverage while I was there. And so I walked around and asked folks, a couple of questions, why should everyone care about transgender rights? And there were older folks there who fumbled their words, who maybe didn't use what we would consider the most PC language, right? They didn't really articulate it the best, but their heart was in the right place.
And that's what matters.
Yeah, they were trying to learn. They were like, whatever it is, whoever you are is fine. And that overall message of everyone deserves their rights, that was the overall message. And it was beautiful to witness that.
It feels like events like this, like even though someone shows up and they may not know all the right terms and they could use the entire, like the wrong term, the wrong verbiage, whatever, or like you said, they're not the most politically correct, but they are there to try to learn and understand the issues and be supportive of other people. And that feels like that's really what matters, as opposed to fumbling your words in a live interview. What was your main takeaway after the event? And did it meet your expectations going into it?
The event superseded my expectations. The thought and detail and love that went into this, I thought was beautiful. And I think that that was my overall takeaway, which is that this fight for LGBTQ rights, for trans healthcare rights, for access to abortion. This is a fight that at the end of the day is rooted in love. It's rooted in positivity, whether that is, people making flower crowns and bonding and making new friends, or trans teens being able to make new friends and lay in the grass together and listen to music, whether it's accepting parents, being able to connect with each other and get support, or having access to books and meeting celebrities like Elliot Page. At the end of the day, this is a cause that's rooted in love and positivity.
For those that don't know, you run also an Instagram account that covers lots of issues. You have your own little like news essentially brand going on. But I feel like you're relatively inspired in general and believe in the causes that you fight for. But did you leave the event feeling more inspired or supported or even ready, like invigorated with more energy to keep fighting the fight?
I think that my position is pretty strong. I think that I am solid in my support of this community. I think that my takeaway when I was leaving was that it's not for nothing. That this isn't something that I'm doing for no reason. That this isn't a hopeless fight. It's a hopeful fight. That seeing all these people come together and, like I mentioned before, travel from near and far, cross generations, it showed me that the work that Raquel is doing and Eliel is doing and the work that I do in my own time it bears fruit. There are real results. People's minds are being changed, and people are willing to take the information that we give them and share it with others. And I think that that was it was great. I left really joyful.
Now, I assume you go to a lot of, I don't want to say a lot as in it's a huge amount, but I assume you attend a fair share of events like the Gender Liberation March. For those who want to connect with you and follow all the things you're doing, how can they do that?
The best place to follow me is on Instagram, and my Instagram is at here's why Kevin. I post a lot of news and trending stories and things like that, but my direct messages are always open. So if anyone has questions or needs guidance or support for a cause that maybe they're fighting, then that's the best place to reach me.
And the last thing I want to close with is for those who thought about going to the march and just didn't, for one reason or the other, what would you say to those people about future events, future gender liberation marches that they could attend? Maybe they just felt there's something overwhelming about going to a live event like that where there's a lot of people for a cause. What would you say to those people?
That there's community in those spaces. And I've been one of those people before who has been like, maybe I want to go to this thing. And you back out because you don't want to go alone, or you're fearful that, maybe something bad is going to happen. Maybe those events are targeted in some way. But there's real community there. And so it's a place to make friends, to build community, and it's a place that is safe because we're all there.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your experience at the Gender Liberation March.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Pride is a production of Straw Hut Media. If you like the show, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Then follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, the app formerly known as Twitter, and Snapchat at Pride, and tune in weekly for more episodes. Be sure to share this episode with your friends and subscribe for more stories from amazing queer people. If you'd like to connect with me, you can follow me everywhere at Levi Chambers. Pride is produced by me, Levi Chambers, Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, and Brandon Marlowe, and edited by Daniel Ferreira.